Now I'm going to be speaking for a whole day, so y'all are stuck with me, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And if you fall asleep or just don't want to, listen for a little bit, there's three things that we're going to learn about, okay, at areas of the law. And that's civil, criminal, and administrative aspects of the law. And I used a fact pattern that was actually based on some cases. A good friend of mine, he's a wonderful guy. We always think of it as the very imposing institution, the Board of Nursing. A good friend of mine, Dusty Johnston. He is the counsel for the board, and he sees a lot of things going on. So does Anthony Diggs, who is the chief investigator. One of these cases is sort of based on it, kind of like the Law and Order ripped from the pages or ripped from the headlines. So that's what we're going to do today. We'll be looking at a very interesting case, and we're going to be taking some breaks, and we're going to have some interactive discussion. We are going to have a crash course in law school today. Some of you may play lawyers. Hopefully no one's going to have to play a defendant. But we are going to see what happens to a defendant and go through the system. And we are going to go through the civil, criminal, and administrative law. So that's where we're at right now. Now, I did have to put some information. Hopefully that'll be the most busy slide. So we're just always having to put down on there. When I do speak to people, I do tell them it doesn't constitute legal advice, because sometimes I do speak for the National Council of State Board of Nurses. And in other jurisdictions, I am licensed in Texas. I am able to practice federal law, and I can practice federal law throughout the United States. You just have to ask permission from each court if you go to that federal system. So I am looking at a federal system because we may be using this example again for at least some of this lecture. Our goals and objectives are gaining knowledge on the Nurse Practice Act. We'll be covering certain areas of the Nurse Practice Act that pertain to advanced practice nurses. I used to just give these talks to student nurses, and they would reserve it for me to come and speak to them the last semester. And my goal was to scare them straight, if you would see, before they started. But then this sort of evolved. It became an organic process, and we looked at increasing knowledge for all nurses, and especially for advanced practice nurses, to learn about the civil system, the criminal system, and to learn about your administrative rights if you are reported to the board, God forbid. That's when we would talk about that this afternoon. Okay, so we're going to increase our knowledge on the due process and constitutional rights you have during even a criminal investigation. Many of these cases lend themselves to having criminal, civil, and administrative aspects. And we're having to determine how trouble with the law can affect a nurse's professional license. So this is a good area. The example that we're using, the fact pattern that we're using, is going to be one that will lend to all three areas. And as you will soon find out, I used to say, don't just look in the phone book. Now it's like, don't just look in Google, right? You have to look at attorneys that do handle this type of area of the law. But also you're looking at sometimes when a criminal attorney, criminal defense attorney, is taking care of a nurse, we'll learn that if you're not looking at the nurse's license and the impact it can have, a criminal lawyer will say, boy, I got that person a great deal. But the board doesn't think so. This is based on a real life scenario. I just changed around the facts a little bit, the names, changed around the type of sort of scenario that we had. But let's look at the case study that we're going to be looking at throughout the day. Pat is an MP, and for the last 12 years, Pat has been working in pain management and hospice. So that lends itself already to dealing with pain medication, anti-anxiety medications, controlled substances that really are just a part and parcel of that practice. And she's a respected part of the team. And as we all know, after October of 2014, we could not call in, even if we were working in those areas, call in Lortab or Narco or the scheduled type 2 drug that it became. About 2-3 years ago, that movement, probably about 3 years ago, where they changed the 20-year dynamic of saying people that are in pain need to be medicated. If you'll recall, OxyContin was one of those drugs that said, you know, you'd have the nice touchy-feely butterflies, sort of beautiful scenario of, it's changed my life. I can play with my grandchildren again. Well, that grandmother became an opiate addict, and it's a tragedy what's going on. If you interview people that are on heroin, many started with pain medication. So our view of Schedule IIs has changed, so I thought it would be an excellent topic for us to discuss, since these medications in the Schedule Type 2, such as OxyContin, narco, are being under strict scrutiny. So also DEA is watching how you prescribe the medications that you use, and also, especially here in Houston and other areas that are big hubs, I can tell you that if people don't watch how their prescription pad is being used, you could have somebody readily use that and abuse that. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. Well, as I put in my scenario there, just to make it a little scintillating, Pat is not who we think she is, okay, so to speak. Now, I put that in there because I loaded that because I want half the room to be defense and half the room to be prosecution. And in a civil case, it would be defense and plaintiff, and in an administrative case, administrative judge. Before that, the board. In an informal conference, you'll learn that nothing is informal about an informal conference. And then you have the SOA, State Office of Administrative Hearing, many of which I've participated in. So I hope to give you a sort of a voyeuristic view that you never ever have to personally endure this, but we're going to learn a lot about it, and you can share that with other people. So this is, in fact, what happens. We're going to go through a scenario this morning, and it's quite lengthy, but I want you all to get that flavor. I want you all to get into that mindset of what really goes on. And this is, as I said, this is happening now. One afternoon, DEA agents come in with BON investigators, and that's often common, and raid the pain management clinic where she's employed. Also, when you have federal agents coming in there with what's called, fancy word, subpoena ducis tecum, is a document that says we can get things, okay? We can get documents, we can get phones, we can get laptops, and they can be seized. And we've all kind of seen that in the headlines, where you have somebody walking out, all these agents, come on in, hi, how are you? And then we have them coming out with cell phones, laptops, all the hard copies of records, and they shut down that business right then and there. This is happening not only in this, but in healthcare fraud. Healthcare fraud cases are rampant. We've got federal agents, and we also have the Texas counterpart that is also handling a lot of these types of cases. But we're going to be looking, for our intents and purposes, at the drug case, okay? And this is about a pain management clinic, because that's all the buzz right now is the opioid problem. Well, of course, here in Texas, we need a collaborating physician. We are trying to make some inroads. We're going into session. I hope to probably run into you all there in Austin and work with our representatives to try to get a bit more autonomy. We gained some turf, but let's assume for our purposes the year is 2015, 2016. And Dr. Smith is her collaborating physician. Now, one of the cases that I handled, a guy like Dr. Smith applied to an ad and said, want to end your career on a good note. Well, a lot of these pain management doctors that we've seen in what now is being called, used to be pain management clinic, many of the federal agents and investigators call them pill mills. And so the dynamic and the perception of pain management clinics has changed. They're watching if somebody's coming from Pearland all the way to downtown Houston, why are they traveling to get their pain medication? They're monitoring where the people live and where they go, and they look at patterns. And that's why, you know, the EMR, or electronic medical record, is something that I always say is like kind of like a tattoo on a bad night. You can't take it away, okay? It's here to stay. Once you burn it, once you close that note, really, unless it's an act of Congress, you don't want to reopen that note or put something else. But Dr. Smith has been collaborating, MD. Unbeknownst to Pat, the pain clinic has been under investigation for 2 years. My experience of over a decade working with federal agents and representing people and sometimes cooperators or whistleblowers is when the federal government says they know everything, they know everything. They have the documents, they have the boxes full of hard copies, they've got the EMR, they've got all of the documentation from the pharmacies. And this number I'm not pulling out of thin air. Actually, this is a conservative number we'll be using for our intents and purposes. I've seen some as high as over 10,000. For many people, always picking on Houston for healthcare fraud, for you know, drugs, and you know, it's a big hub. So, and you know, we have one of the best medical centers on the planet. We have the 4th largest population. So many people have dubbed Las Vegas cocktail for the Lortab and Soma. Houston cocktail is the Lortab, Soma, and Xanax. Often people say that it mimics what you feel like when you're on heroin. The medical records reflect a pattern of providing the same script to many patients. So they're watching and saying, now wait a minute, somebody got the max Narcos, somebody got the max Xanax, somebody got the same Soma over and over and over again. So they're watching this pattern. Now, some people do legitimately need it. Many people legitimately need it. In fact, arguably, being the lawyer for something like this is the government and pharmaceutical companies created this addiction, but yet we are the end target of that because these people have been on pain medication for years, and then we're trying to wean them off, or they're in legitimate pain. So, the medical records reflect a pattern. Does it mean that there was something intentional? Well, that's for half the room to decide, and the other half to nail the nurse. So we're going to be looking at, and the nurse practitioner. So that's what we're looking at. Come on in. The medical record reflects that pattern, so there is a suspicion. Now, representing the defense on this, and we'll kind of split up in groups throughout the day, Pat had reported her DPS number being used or misappropriated 3 years before. She had contacted, let's use our example here, HPD, Houston Police Department, and had contacted formerly DPS that controlled this along with DEA. The local police had made a report, but very overwhelmed with things going on. They really said, okay, thanks for telling us, but no one was ever really apprehended because prescription fraud and rings that work in it are very hard and elusive to catch. Often it's people, the end user is really the patient, who may test negative for the drugs. And why may they test negative for the drugs and keep getting them? Anybody know? Well, I've got a sharp group here. That's right. They test negative, and many seniors are selling the drugs up to $10 a tablet or more. If it's OxyContin, I guess some of these addicts or people that abuse the drug have hit the lotto because it's very strong. Unfortunately, she, in our circumstance, did report it, but she did not perform continued verification. Now, I put that there because at the time, it was a DPS DEA, and as we know now, things are going to dovetail into DEA. Or request another DEA number, which is difficult, causes red flags. Some people, for various reasons, say, I don't want to start the process again and go through DPS DEA, now it'll just be DEA. And of course, she didn't want to scare Dr. Smith away. It's hard enough to get a collaborator, much less keep one that will stay around and not want half your profit. Meanwhile, back at the Rancher Clinic, Agent Starling, if some of you all are old enough to remember, my first date was, I took my wife to Silence of the Lambs. Real romantic, but you know, I didn't know it was going to be that scary. Well, anyway, so I used Agent Starling's name as question, and this is a common practice, okay? They split people up, divide and conquer, you know, and you'll learn that it's okay for agents and the police to lie to you. It's okay. It's above board. Case law has said that they can say, well, Jane in the other room says that you're running a pill mill. We know all about it. What do you have to say? And that's above board. Well, she's got a medical assistant, and he's in the other room, and they start asking and interrogating people. Now, many of the things is that we see on TV is what? You say, I want to talk to my lawyer, okay? Well, you see a guy dressed up like me, but then with a nice gun, a big badge, okay, and maybe that has the powers of intimidation or persuasion. It's not so easy to say, I want my attorney, because really when you are detained, you can be detained for a little while, and then you are in custody. Now, the shades of gray that happen when you're detained and in custody happen in this sort of circumstance. And there's a lot of factors that go into that we'll learn about. So they pretty much closed down the clinic for the day, told the patients to leave. Well, when you've got 4 black Suburbans and some police cars there and everybody's looking out in the neighborhood, you know, if you're a smart patient, you will leave. And they left. And Pat's in the final exam room. And interrogation begins. Now they would say just questioning. No, you're free to leave at any time, and then you'll become our target, is what they're saying. Sure, you know, can I have a lawyer? And the agents say this will have to go another way if you get a lawyer involved. Common practice is to say, this will go another way. What would be that other way? We're going to prosecute you. We're going to put bracelets on you. We're going to arrest you. So it's a common technique to say, sure, we'll get you a lawyer and everything, but you're going to go down to the station house. We're going to book you, we're going to hold you. I don't know if the lawyer can come see you for a day or two. You've got kids, you've got a mortgage, you've got other patients to see. You've never been in trouble with the law, much less seen anything except Law and Order and the handcuffs and the click on TV. This is real life. Your heart is racing, you're nauseated, you're feeling sick to your stomach, and you're saying, my career is over. And she's told commonly, you can leave anytime you want. Well, you know, again, how do you feel when you're in that situation and you're told you're free to leave, but you have people taking all of your medical records, you have people questioning you and putting a lot of pressure on you. And if you have people from the board, plus, and this happens a lot, the board and the DEA working together, then you're confused saying, okay, if I leave, I might lose my license. If I stay, I might get arrested. So no Miranda warnings are read at that time, but she voluntarily informs them about the prescription theft and says, now wait a minute, they stole my number a while back. I reported this. Okay. And of course they'll be saying, sure, we'll verify that. We don't have any record of that. They probably do, but they're trying to make her admit to something, right? So they'll say, we don't know what you're talking about. Then they say, okay, and they flip around a laptop, or if they're fancy, they have the one that you can see from the other side, and they show, look. And then literally I've gone through thousands, days of looking at scripts. I've sat down with clients and gone through a list of medications from one pharmacy that'll take half a day, another pharmacy, and if people have had, say, a pain management clinic or a hospice clinic, and there's been thousands of patients going through there, how many are they responsible for? How many they prescribe? At a moment's notice, when you don't have access to your records and they're asking you these questions, you may not know. But the prescriptions which prompted their investigation are from a 90-mile radius. And she denies giving 90% of the scripts. It says, I didn't give those scripts, much less the refills, no narco after October 6th, and that's gospel. You know, I didn't call that in. I didn't break the law. And DEA and BON investigators tell her, well, things just don't add up here. There are thousands of scripts out there, and you're saying you didn't even give 10% of them? But this is your pain clinic along with the doctor, right? And then they start throwing her little curveballs like, did you know that, where's your certificate to see people, and you're a pain management nurse practitioner? Aren't you supposed to be certified in this? Aren't you supposed to have done some extra paperwork? And how many patients do you see that are on pain medicine versus you treat them for internal medicine? And that's where we have that 50% breaking point that causes red flags too. And often these nurse practitioners that have these pain management clinics don't know that you have to take these extra steps. I get calls all the time. I want to make a clinic, but how do I do it and not get in trouble? So these are the types of areas that the law is kind of gray on. Well, we got Dr. Smith in the other room, the collaborator, and he's 78. He's about to have a transmural MI. Okay? I mean, this guy, you know, he's an easy target. If I'm the DEA agent, I said, this is going to be a slam dunk, you know. I'm going to give him a little nitro spray and then start my interrogation. And I'll come in there and I'll say, look, we're not really after you. We're looking at the records, okay? And we want to just protect the public. That's what you want to do, right, doctor? You're working here to help people. Well, my job is to help people too, okay? And then say, you have a right to an attorney. You can leave anytime you want. Do you want to talk to me? Well, I mean, his knees are about to buckle. We get him a glass of water. He's sitting down. I don't feel well, you know, and say, you know, this guy's about to code on me, so I'm going to have to calm him down. So I begin my interrogation, and I find out, of course I already knew this years back, we've been watching this, he's semi-retired. He fits the pattern of many of these pain management clinics that maybe are in heightened scrutiny, where you have an elderly or retired or semi-retired physician, and they see ads like, wanna end your career on a high note. I kept that one. That's a real ad. You want to end your career on a high note. Okay, and I said, this one's too good. And so I kept this, and I said, can you imagine? And so he sure did. He's a semi-retired anesthesiologist, right? And he's just doing chart review, and maybe he's a medical director of 10 home healths, and he's making $1,000 each a month, and he's signing his 485s, the plan of care, and maybe they're watching him for healthcare fraud as well, and maybe, just maybe, they're watching him for other things, but he's been disciplined, which when they're looking for patterns, and now with the electronic medical record, they can see big chunks of data, huge amounts and patterns of behavior with all of this. Now, some of it can be interpreted one way or another, and they have broad discretion who they prosecute. Honestly, in many of these cases, they're going to prosecute people that are representing the poor, representing clinics that are on the margin. They're not going to go after the Cadillac style pain management with 10 anesthesiologists on board and everything, unless their pattern is what? Gone crazy. And this afternoon we're going to find out what constitutes really bad prescriptive behavior and what we can do to sort of understand the risk management part of it for an APRN, whether you're in a clinic that does pain management or handles it. You know, some people are so terrified right now that by a show of hands, how many of y'all are working for or collaborating with a physician who says, no, I'm not even going to give Lortab or anything. We just send him to pain management. How many are, what's going on with that? A good number. A good number have stopped giving it altogether. So now we've seen a 180-degree turn in what we're doing. And if anybody's got anything, please shoot up a hand or want to share. This is interactive, not just me talking, because in a little bit we're going to break out and do our group here. So kind of group project. So been disciplined in the past. Okay, so I'm looking at that, and maybe I show him the paper and say, look, you've already been in trouble before. We're not trying to get you in trouble. We just want you to talk to us. We've seen that you kind of have a problem with documentation. That was a long time ago, you know, he responds, you know. I mean, I did what I needed to do, and I learned my lesson. And, you know, we'll say, well, you've
had a failure to monitor patients receiving pain meds in the past, and you got a warning. And now we're back here again, and you're being a collaborating physician for one of these pain management clinics. So here we are again, you know. And so he had the sanctions, the usual chart monitoring and things. And he tells the agents he doesn't feel well. What? I don't blame him. He's in trouble, right? But he doesn't want any trouble. He indicates that Pat saw the patients, which is the APRN, suggested the scripts. He went along with her. Of course, he's telling agents that. And he pre-wrote the medications, which is pretty much a no-no. And Dr. Smith would sign the narco scripts. So you'd have Pat signing, what? The Soma, Xanax, and he would sign the narco after October of 2014. And he becomes very emotional. Often, you know, you see people at panic state and tells agents, please, I don't want to die in prison. I have cancer. Please, God. Agents tell him to reveal all he knows about Pat and he will not be charged. And the police and agents can lie. We're not after you. You're not a target. And then in their mind, bubble, 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 circle, not yet. Okay? But you might be. Rocky, who is the medical assistant, has a history of deferred cocaine possession, marijuana charge, 2 DUIs. His attorney obtained deferred adjudication on the drugs. And then they moved to expunge it or move to non-disclose it. So when you run a background check, what comes up? Nothing. And Rocky, on top of that, he had one of the 2 DWIs dismissed. At the time, they didn't draw any blood. They didn't have to do mandatory breath. So he had that one kicked. Prosecutorial discretion, maybe the case was weak, maybe they lost the video, whatever. And then he pled reckless to the other one. So all we have is a moving violation. Another good one to plead out DWIs to is obstruction of highway. And why obstruction of highway? Because nobody knows what it is. You could be blocking a cow in the road in a in a rural area. So these things come up. People that hire them, even if they do their due diligence, their credentialing, they say, well, it doesn't look like he's got anything that rises to the level of suspicion that I can hire him. However, on paper, in reality, he's been in county jail. He's terrified of going to prison. He tells them, well, they've told him, you know, things that they can say. You've hit the big time. You know, you're now part of a conspiracy. As we'll learn, conspiracies and indictments. I had a really great attorney tell me one time, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want to. I can say this ham sandwich is bad, this ham sandwich possibly prescribed drugs. Let's go ahead and indict. Does indict mean guilty? No. Indictment means that you're being accused of something and there's enough there that they can move forward with the prosecution. But when you hear such and such doctor, such and such nurse practitioner were indicted, already in the media you're thinking, well, if they arrested them, they must have done something. And when you represent people, and we're going to do jury selection too today, you'll learn that you have to, it's not jury selection, it's deselection. I don't want you on my jury, but I don't want to show I don't want you on my jury when I pick the jury. You know, I'll say, thank you for your honesty, juror number 5. And then I'll say, I'm not going to use her on my jury. No. And we get strikes and things like that. And we get to keep them off the jury. How many of y'all have ever served on jury duty?
Never get picked.
Never get picked. And why? And I'll tell you why. Lawyers don't want to have nurses on their jury if they can help it. And why is that? Because we're one of the most respected professions and people look at us as authority figures. If it involves anything remotely related to medical or health care, and it always does, it comes down to that, you know, they're going to look to the nurse in the deliberations as the leader, as the educator. So they'll say, I don't want an authority figure, a teacher, policeman, or a nurse, especially if you're a defense lawyer. That can be hard. Now, it's a little bit different for me when I pick a jury on a Monday morning. You're having to go through what a juror's mind is, and I'm getting just a little bit of field, and we'll get right back on. But just keep in mind, most people on a jury have families to feed. They've got work to do. They had to pay for parking. They're getting paid $9 a day to serve in the jury in some counties. They did everything they could to get out of it. So, you know, some of the questions I ask are, how many of y'all want to be here today? And everybody giggle, giggle, giggle. And I say, and see, jury selection's about telling the truth. Okay? And that's what we're going to do here today. My name's Joe Flores. I'm a registered nurse. I'm an advanced practice nurse. And let me tell you what that means a little bit. My mom was a nurse. My brother works in ER. My wife's a nurse. My sister-in-law's a nurse. And what have I done right there? And then I walk away from the podium, and then I open up my jacket. What have I done to people? I've relaxed a little bit, taken it down. Forget I have the suit on. Now you're picturing me in scrubs with a lab coat. Now I start becoming one of you. Then I start interacting and making a little bit of light rapport, just like we do when we go into homes. When we go into a hospital room, we take down the temperature. So all of y'all are good lawyers already to begin with, because we know how to get in that room and reach people, right? We know how to connect with them. We know how to talk to them. And so that is why when you use that, you want people to forget, because in a minute, you know, one of these slides I have it there, approval ratings of nurses versus lawyers. Now, if I want somebody to like me and trust me, am I going to talk about my stellar legal career, or I'm going to talk about helping patients? Mm-hmm. So you see why lawyers think the way they do, and today you'll kind of get an idea of it, and we're going to actually practice law. Just practice, not do it. This is not having you all swear in as lawyers, but you'll get a taste of what we're having to look at, and it's not an easy job. Because on both sides, there's always good and wrong. In healthcare, we tend to see things as black and white. Your triglycerides are 600. You know, that's not a good 600. You know, it's just 600. We think in black and whites in science, and there's a lot of absolutes. But then as you go out there and practice as nurses, there's shades of gray. There's reasons why people have these numbers, genetics, all these other things. So Rocky's going to sing. We know that, you know. He's, you know, they're all being very strong men and crying, screaming, begging for their lives. And he says, I don't want to go to the pen, please. And, you know, I walk into debriefing rooms, and, you know, I've had, I had one case where the guy said, I'll never break, and he was a drug trafficker accused of it, and he was running a DTO, drug trafficking organization. And the way he broke was, they said, well, we know everything already. He said, none of my guys, you know, he told me in confidence, would ever rat on me or do anything, so I'm not going to plead, we're going to trial. And then later when I got the discovery, which are all the documents they need to get me under a case called Brady versus Maryland, the prosecutor has to give me everything. And I showed him that it was his wife who had been cooperating with the federal government for 3 years against him, right? They have the privilege and they can waive it. They told her, if you knew about it, you knew that he was smuggling drugs, you go to jail and you lose your children, or you help us. So these are real life examples. So Rocky, filled with terror, tells of drug prescriptions flowing like milk and honey around there. And patients all seem to have chronic pain and wanted the good stuff, you know. No naproxen in this clinic, right? And they would drive in miles to see Dr. Pat and grandfatherly Dr. Smith. They make a really good couple. And he swears he just did their bidding. Of course he's going to say that. He prepared the scripts by writing in the Soma, Lord Tab, and Xanax, and they'd sign them. Agents tell Rocky to close down the clinic, bring Dr. Smith in the room, and guess what? They're both to go home and not speak of this, and they're just praying that they don't get indicted. So they leave. So she doesn't know they leave. They leave wet with relief, with dire warnings not to leave Harris County. All the agents now enter the room, and when Pat was scared before, now she's really scared. Now you got 10 people in there, laptop seized, records going out, people rushing around. And out of nowhere, Pat is read her rights, like what's going on. It says, look, you're handcuffed, and those things, from what I understand, hurt a lot. And your wrists hurt for days, if not weeks afterward. And if you got carpal tunnel and get handcuffed, oh boy. Pat is handcuffed, taken to federal detention, and she's had a nasty divorce, and it's kind of hard to call when you're on a cell phone. So another good little technique they say is they already have you handcuffed, and they say, do you need to call anybody? And what are they trying to do? They're trying to have you consent to open their phone. This is a big case law issue. Do they have a right to look at your cell phone? I did a case with 35,000 texts, and out of those texts they got like 5 that were incriminating. One of my clients had sunglasses on and in a big lounge chair and a cigar on one of his, he's a kid. And he took a picture and he said, this is what I looked like when I made my first million. Well, guess what they did? They put the picture up that big on a screen and the jury's watching during a trial and saying, so yeah, you were a big kingpin of this. And it's hard to, pictures, really images like that just burn into people's minds. So, it's hard. So when they say, can I look at your phone? They can look at the text and everything. So she just says, please, because, my son's at school for whatever reason, and they call. I've had those calls before where I'll say hello, and then they'll say, it's almost surreal. This is Officer Smith. I'm here with your client, Tom Jones, and he wants to talk to you. You're handcuffed in there. They put it there, and they say, get me out of this, So gives them the passcode. So she's pretty much has agreed to and consented to a search. Now, later on, I could try to get that. Some of you lawyers out there already, what could I do to try to keep those texts out? Anybody? Yeah, you're getting warm. Yeah, file motions to suppress. Illegal search and seizure, right? But after 9/11 and after everything else, it's getting harder and harder our Constitution has been eroded. And plus, in all fairness to the government, the people just put anything they want on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and more people are getting their probation revoked because of what they put on there. Had a good time last night, 190 likes. Well, if they have a dislike button, the probation officer would be pushing it and saying, I have a picture of you with a beer at a bar. You're supposed to be at home at 10 at night, and they print it out, and they revoke based on those grounds. So now you have them saying, we have the right to go through your phone if you're on supervised release. We have a right to go into your home, check you at any time. Your curfew, we have a right to look at and you give us all your passcodes to your emails and everything else. So of course, somebody going through this that has never been in such a situation is shocked. It's like very surreal. Now, what a lot of people don't know when they're in custody is there's cameras. And the camera faces this way when they pull it out. What they don't know is the camera can be turned on. But they look like they're messing with their visor. They turn the camera towards you. And they're talking, so what do you do for a living? Why'd you do pain management? I mean, you could have done something else. I know, I messed up, Whatever. It's all being recorded and you're talking willingly. Those can be used, those videos can be used after your rights are read, and those are admissions. Even if you say, I want my attorney, they can still try to reinstitute interrogation techniques, and if you agree, you waive the right to the attorney. If you've been sleep deprived 3 days and just made bond, and then a detective comes in and says, wait, there's just a couple of things, a little bit of paperwork before you leave, and they get you to sign a confession. This happens all the time. And just say, I just want to go home. I haven't bathed in 2-3 days. I'm in there with animals. Don't put me back in that cell. I'll sign anything just to what? Get out of here. And that's reality. Pat is terrified, afraid of losing a career and reputation, and agents allow Pat to talk freely about the case, and they're recording her.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
If they don't notify you that you're being recorded, is that admissible?
If they don't notify that you're being recorded, say on a DWI, yes. They can also try to admit. Now the video, if you weren't read your rights, or I've had things suppressed where I had a lady in custody and 3 men about my size or larger are telling her, she goes, "Can I talk to a lawyer?" No, and you just need to blow in the machine, okay? Those motions to suppress, I'd say, was a coercive environment. It has to be pretty extreme nowadays. It used to be a lot more liberal, Supreme Court. It used to be, and the question was, can they use those videos? And the answer is probably. It depends on also a lot. What we're going to learn today is politics, media. They play a big part of it. The internet has become the Leviathan that, really controls things. So she's processed. That sounds like a really fancy word, kind of like a meat market, right? Pat is processed. It means they take you in, you hear the garage open, boom, they put you in there. You're probably in line with other people. Nowadays, they don't have to roll across. They use the computer. They take a picture. They make you say, keep your eyes open, don't smile. What people don't know is, and at the DPS, how many of y'all have ever been printed for your driver's license? You have probably been in lineups without you ever knowing it. Say a person that looks just like this lovely lady right here. When DE agents question somebody that looks like her and maybe is an APRN and you're maybe a teacher, they don't bring people in lineups like on TV and say, number 1, step forward, I signed the scripts. Number 2, step forward, I signed the scripts. No, they show a paper with the driver's license picture. And you don't have to give consent anymore. And they'll say initial by the person you think was the one who gave you the script. Date it, sign it, all right, good. And that's, people have been, and I've objected to that to deaf ears. It's like these are law-abiding citizens, and you're using, when you're in an airport, they're using face recognition now, software. Everything just blinks, 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 and they'll go, boom, we know that person, okay? That's why they want you to keep your eyes open, don't smile, don't kind of contort your face, and they began, so the process is there. She's been printed, she's been booked. Then reality sets in. I want to go to the bathroom in a little while. Okay, so your dignity even to go to the restroom is taken away. When am I going to get a drink of water? When am I going to eat? What's going to happen to me? It's kind of like this is just common. Then you're put in a holding cell, which is very common with 14 to 20. I've seen up to 50 people in a holding cell from here to the outlets. And you walk in and there's just bars and screens, and then me and 10 other attorneys are like this in between the bars trying to talk, and there's like a little slide door you have to get the guard over, and for them to sign a paper, then they have to make sure you're not passing them a spring in their mouth like Silence of the Lambs to open up the handcuffs. And they have to watch the hands. The professionals will watch your hands and your body movement, not your eyes. They're watching to see movements to see if they're going to get any contraband. And some attorneys have snuck in cell phones for their clients. Or they bring it in unknowingly, and then they'll just go, okay, you want to call your sister or whatever, and sure, dial up this number. It's not really a sister. It's someone that is a medium, and he says, did you water the plants today? And used your phone, code for go knock out this guy. Make sure to knock out the second plant today, will you? And then, so they can use your phone to, cartel people use phones to order hits and code. So very, 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 in other words, when people say, can they use my phone? I say, no, I wish I could, but I don't want to be in the same cell as you. I've had defendants that are in jail on Facebook with their phone. And they've had phones brought in by guards, and they're posting on Facebook. And sending out messages and threatening witnesses. It's just true. Organized crime, they get in phones all the time. They use drugs in prison all the time. Most of the detainees in a federal thing, especially like Houston, you're dealing with undocumented aliens, or you're dealing with gang members, or you're dealing with both. You're dealing with MS-13. You're dealing with, and females just as well as males have gang affiliation. Now, the thing is, I just saw this show, and I'm trying to remember, with John Turturro on HBO, and I think it was Last Night was the name of the show. It was a great show because it really showed how the system works. And it said, don't talk to anybody. Well, again, that's hard to do when you're in a cell and you don't know what's happening, and then your best friend becomes somebody who's been there a lot. Don't worry, they're gonna bring us something to eat. And what's your name? And they start a friendly face. I can talk to somebody. Don't talk to anybody, because especially in federal with mandatory minimums and people facing 30 years, they'll do anything to lower their sentence. So they'll befriend you, and then they go and testify against you later, even if they didn't know you from Adam. But for whatever you said to them that day, they become the state's or the government's expert. So, and I know I'm beating this with a dead horse, but I want you all to really get into it and understand the situation of criminal, civil, and administrative law. Every detail matters. So they began talking. She asked her, what you arrested for, honey? Tell me. You look so stressed. You look like my sister, Pat, And Pat, not wanting to offend her anger, she's seeing tats everywhere. She's seeing people that are really raised and grown up hard, and starts just saying, I just try to help people. I gave them narcotics, And one person there, has this conspiracy. They're looking at a long time, facing 30 years, hanging on every word, being her best friend. And she says, yeah, many were patients, but I'm innocent. I just wanted the patients to be pain-free. Well, so we'll get back to that in a minute. Jail phone calls, they're all recorded. I don't trust the phone when I talk to my clients that are in jail. I tell them, don't tell me too much over the phone. And then I say, any electromagnetic recordings should stop right now or are inadmissible. And then I'll tell them, okay, now we can talk. It freaks them out. Like when I start, no, wait, let me say this. My name is Joe Flores. I'm your attorney. Or you're wanting to hire me as your attorney. Anything you tell me is inadmissible. This is attorney-client privilege based on the 5th, 6th Amendment to right to counsel, and also the right to remain silent. Okay, now we can talk. And they're like, what did you just say? And I'm trying to telegraph to them, don't say a lot over the phone, because depending on your county, depending on your demographics, depending if it's federal, they record some. Even though they're not supposed to, they record calls. Because, again, the situation is there are crooked attorneys that may be part of what? A conspiracy to do drugs, to hide evidence, and sometimes they may be watching the attorney. It becomes a sort of paranoid sort of system. And the her ex-husband, being the supportive man he is, reports the son is fine, asks, what's going on, Well, it's natural. They think I distributed over 7,000 unnecessary scripts. And they think I allowed people to use my DNA number to resell the drugs. Did you? He asks. And she replies, while I don't know, I just got sloppy. I didn't follow up on my police on my police reports. They could have used my number for all I know. This EMR system, I told you before we got divorced, it monitors everything. You can't go back and cover your mistakes anymore. It's like a tattoo. It's there forever. I don't know. What's the big deal? No one OD'd. The patients were a pain management clinic. What were we going to give them? Tylenol? They don't want Tylenol. They want the good stuff. Just get me out of here, please. Whatever you do, don't tell them I had Dr. Smith call in Lortab, Xanax, and Soma for me a couple of times. Oh. All right? These guys have it in for me. I swear I didn't give out the 7,000 scripts. No way. Some ring did it. And then the ex replies, should you tell me this stuff over the phone? Well, why'd you ask me if I did it, you idiot? That's why I divorced you. You don't think, I got our child to think, do not get me involved in your drama. I'll see about getting you out. I'm not made of money. Meanwhile, his new wife is probably raging. You divorced her, and we're still not rid of her. And now she's, she might get us in trouble. and you took me to the cleaners on the divorce, I had to throw that one in. Karma, Okay, very sympathetic. Okay, so now another, 24 hours has gone by, and they take her in front of a judge, and we'll be taking a break here in a sec, and a bond hearing. She's in scrubs. Now, I left it there to think, did they give her the scrubs? Usually they process you and stuff before you really get and go upstairs. They'll give you your orange scrubs, or your orange is the new black. And she has not bathed, brushed her teeth, or combed her hair. Very common. Feels awful, sleep deprived. You can't sleep in there. 30 minutes before the hearing, a young attorney enters a holding cell full of 20 other prisoners. This is reality. I go in there, and this is a business. You walk in there and you're very nice to your client, and what? The other guys are maybe being jerks. I walk in, hi, how are you? My name's Joe Flores, how you doing? Have they been taking care of your medical care? You know what I'm doing? I'm telling the other 10 I'm a better attorney than these other guys. You probably need to hire me, but I'm looking at him, look, I'm gonna come back and visit. Don't panic. I've already contacted your family. Okay, how are you feeling? The others are listening. The other guys are, sign this paper, say you're guilty, So it's a business, so, part of this is showmanship, And so I'm trying to make you guys better attorneys today. So 30 minutes before the hearing, a young attorney enters, right? The U.S. Marshals are there, looking at hand-eye movements. These guys, they should be the calendar, not the firemen. These guys are like this, and necks like this. And and they're there to protect the federal judges, the magistrates, and they don't mess around. They worked hard. They usually worked their way up the ranks, or they've come back in from in-country in Iraq, Afghanistan. They've applied. They know how to use their hands, their weapon, and they're armed and very intimidating individuals. They're sweetheart guys at Christmas parties, but not in this situation. Well-armed, flat affect. She's intimidated. These guys are scary, and orders are given without question. Get over here. Move over here. This is the first time your freedom has been denied. You're being treated like a dog, and woe to the person who goes against the system or asks too many questions. So the scene is chaos. The way I like to say is, I thought ER was bad when I worked as an RN, but the legal system is tough. Public defenders. In the federal system, public defenders taught me. Public defenders in the federal system are some of the best practitioners on the planet. You know why? Because you're in front of federal judges. Federal judges want you to be prepared. You have to be prepared on time, and you don't waste their time, or you get in a lot of trouble. So when you have a federal public defender, it's not like the movies. Now, some counties on state, they'll just get anybody to be your public defender. The new guy just fresh out of school that wants to make $90 a plea, he's trying to pay his bills and his law school loans, but not in federal. Federal, I took a year of just material witnesses, which are just the guys that are squealing on the other people, and they're just there to get deported back. I took those so I could learn how the federal system works, because I saw guys who walked in there real bold and brash and thought he could get away with it. They'd get reported to the bar, got fined, got sanctioned. They were stupid enough to let their phone go off in federal court, $750 fine, found in contempt. The marshals seize him. That's the first time I ever heard seize him in the 21st century. One guy's phone's walking on, he just kind of swaggers out. He goes, seize him. Oh my gosh, it was like a kingdom. A federal judge said seize him, and what did the marshals do? They got him. And they said, you're going to be detained, and I'll talk to you after I hear the whole docket, but I don't care, be quiet. And then they hold him. So these are a very serious court. This happens. So, in this scenario, she's in there. And so he tells her, look, and he's a good lawyer. So he's already talked to the U.S. attorney. He's already talked to DEA before he even went in there. And you have seconds. This is the NFL. You get the ball, here comes the lineman, and they're going to, So when you're in there, I got 5 minutes. I got to go talk. Hey, how you doing, John? And it's all about relationships. You'll talk to the U.S. attorney. Hi, John, how you doing? Okay, I've got Pat in there. She's a nurse. I'm a nurse, too. That's what they call me. And they, okay, what do we got? And he said, oh, man. Of course he's going to say it's the worst case scenario. She's like the worst case I've ever seen. I go, you always say that. How many? 7,000 counts. I would say, And it's a pain management clinic. What do you think they're giving? Aspirin? Anyway, so what do you have? Okay, well, this is our reasonable suspicion, reasonable cause. She made all these admissions. She said this. I've got a jailhouse recording. Joe, I'll send you the DVD later when you give me your request for discovery and everything. And you can come see it if you want. Anyway, and then I've got the agent here. So if you're going to give me a bunch of heck over the bond hearing and everything, I've got the agent over there. No, don't worry. Let me go talk to him. Okay, 30 seconds have gone by. I go and talk to the agent. How you doing? He hates lawyers, of course. And I'll go, hey, how you doing? I have to establish rapport quick. And say, I don't think we've met before, but I worked with, Agent Harris. And, he'll go, oh, Agent Harris? Okay, level down. Okay, what do we got, man? I mean, we'll do whatever we can. And, of course, right now I'm kind of fibbing a little bit. I'll say, we'll do anything to help the case. Okay, and he'll say, all right, we've got this and this. You can look at my file for a second. I've got a speed read. Okay? And then when I go in there, I tell her what I know. So this is a good young lawyer. He goes in there. I'm not young anymore. But when I was learning, I was trained by some very, very good people. So I'll never be the lawyer they are, but they taught me. And I should give them a free commercial right now since Dave is recording. But I think we have waive the preliminary hearing. Preliminary hearing, basically a first shot of the case that we have. As lawyers here today, you're all on my legal team for now. In a minute, you're going to betray me and you're going to go work for the government. But right now, you're with me, so we got a snapshot. And then I'm going to go in there, and right now, it's like auctioning off cattle. I can hear voices, and you have to concentrate and say, look at me. Don't pay attention to anybody else. Look at me here. Look, and she said, I can't hear you. And then we have to be talking like this. Then I have to be worried that anybody else, remember the jailhouse snitches? I have to be careful and say, we can't talk much here, okay? Sometimes I write a little note and show it to them instead, okay? And say, don't talk to anybody. If I say it in front of everybody, they'll get insulted. Guess what? They probably will never hire me either. And oh, you don't trust me? Well, I don't trust you either, I'll just say, don't talk to anybody. I'll come see you later. And they'll take them down to holding cells, and I can go talk to them. And I'm always nice to the U.S. Marshals. They'll let me have another follow-up visit alone. Okay, secondly, they have you recorded on video, is what the attorney says. Your husband mentioning possible prescription fraud. I recommend waiving the hearing and asking for reasonable bond since you have no prior recording and have never missed even a traffic court ticket. You have close ties to the community. What does close ties to the community mean? You've lived here all your life. You are not under the sort of risk of running. So he goes, and how much do you have? She's like, why are you asking me what I owe or how much I have? Because of bond. Okay, pretrial services comes in. This is a young lady usually. A lot of young people work in this, And then they introduce herself. She's trying to find out. She writes a report to give to the judge to see if you merit it. Now, if you've jumped bail 10 times, they're going to say she's going to be remanded. Oh, the worst word in the world. He will be remanded. That means we're keeping you. You're not going. And then I can always do a motion to reconsider bond and come back 10 days later. Come on. They've got a big bond. Okay, so pretrial services says, okay, you look good. She's very confused by all this. I mean, everything happened like that. Okay? And that she might get a bond. Finally, in front of the judge, 36 hours later, another sleepless nights in jail. She goes back in there. Female prisoners are screaming, crying. Others are, praying on the weekend there. Fix my bed, get me some coffee, do all this stuff. She's had 2 meals which were horrible. She can't stomach the rest. She's in shackles. And they chain you like this in your feet and you walk like that. They bring you in with chains, okay? She's taken in shackles. Why? Because some people are crazy. They're afraid he'll attack the judge, right? So even with all the pit bull guys. And then ankle chain, this is common. You're put in a van and try getting in a van with the shackles. And then going, hurry up. And she's met by her attorney. You got minutes. I mean, and he reiterates, a good law professor, you told me, you tell him. You tell him what you were going to tell him. Then you tell him. Then you tell him what you told him. I said, okay, that makes sense. Okay? So you say what you're going to say. You tell them what you're going to say. You say it. Then you tell them what you told them. And then they're supposed to get it, But you have to reinforce. People's adrenaline's pumping. They're really not taking in a lot of information. It's kind of like you have cancer, sir. Anyway, so after they hear that, what are they going to hear? No. Nothing. So you have to reinforce and teach. And, she's in a fog. And he reminds her, be respectful. If he asks, you're not guilty. And then the judge, kind of young guy, he's all over the map. He's got all these cases, and they don't bring you just up like on Law and Order. They bring you up with 10 people, and they ask everybody at once because they're busy. They're moving 200 people. And, you know, somebody's court reporter's typing. You're having the court manager, which is the queen of all she surveys, say, you know, may I have appearances, please? Joe Flores on behalf of Pat Smith. Good morning, Your Honor. My client's in the courtroom. Yeah, okay. And then we all make appearances. Okay, and then they ask if anybody's a Spanish, French, Brazilian speaker, and then they have interpreters that go like this inside this, and then they put headphones on. And now, so you got an interpreter here reading the stuff, slows down everything. Some guys go, what? I can't hear, this headphone doesn't work. You're like, oh, you know, and then it slows down the whole thing. So, you know, she never knew the speed, the lack of empathy, the grave seriousness. She is in panic mode. She knows that she's going to be sick. And she's just, so the hearing lasts minutes. They remind her she's got a right to a pretrial detention hearing. They waive it. Why? Because he says you got a confession and stuff. I don't want all that stuff on the record. She mumbles yes, and the judge says, speak up. And you know why he says speak up? Because the court reporter's writing down everything. Mm-ms, uh-uhs, and they don't count. You have to say yes, sir, no, sir. And you know, after that, the bond is set $50,000. No objection to the bond, because I was nice to the government. And things just got worse, and we'll take a break.